Picture a village built on stilts nailed directly into a cliff face that drops straight into the Bering Sea. No flat ground, no beach, just wooden houses bolted to a 45-degree rock wall, hundreds of feet above the water, in one of the most remote corners of the entire planet. That village is real. It's in Alaska. It's been abandoned for 60 years, and it's just one of 9 ghost towns we're about to walk through, places so strange, so isolated, and so completely forgotten that most Alaskans themselves have never seen them. One of these towns was the richest copper mine on Earth, abandoned so suddenly that workers left food on the tables and tools in the shafts. One was swallowed alive by an earthquake in 4 minutes and 38 seconds. One was home to people who simply vanished, and the only explanation the locals ever offered involved something enormous moving through the trees at night. Stay until the end, because our number 1 ghost town is not just abandoned, it's being erased one building at a time, and nobody is doing anything to stop it. Subscribe. Let's go find them. Number 9, Tin City, Wales, Seward Peninsula, where America ends and silence begins, at the westernmost tip of mainland North America, a point of land called Cape Prince of Wales, where the Bering Strait narrows to just 55 miles between Alaska and Siberia. There is a cluster of abandoned military buildings facing east toward Russia. Tin City was built in 1950 at the peak of Cold War paranoia, when the U.S. Air Force needed radar stations positioned along the Alaskan coast to detect Soviet aircraft crossing the Bering Strait. The location was chosen specifically because on a clear day, you can see the Russian coastline from here with the naked eye. No binoculars needed, just stand outside and look west. The facility operated for decades, staffed by soldiers who were stationed at the edge of the American continent and told to watch. No combat ever came. The radar stations did their job without incident. When better satellite technology made forward radar posts obsolete, the Air Force packed up and left in the 1970s. What they left behind, rows of prefabricated military buildings slowly rusting on the tundra. Wind howls across Cape Prince of Wales almost without pause. The nearest village, Wales, Alaska, has fewer than 150 people. Nobody visits Tin City because getting there requires a small plane to Wales, followed by an overland journey across open tundra. It sits at the exact edge of the United States, facing Russia, unmaintained and forgotten. A Cold War outpost that never fired a shot and was abandoned before the war it was built forever ended. Number 8, Igloo City Hotel, Cantwell, the unfinished hotel that Alaska swallowed driving the Parks Highway between Anchorage and Fairbanks at mile 188 near the small community of Cantwell. You will see something that makes no sense against the Alaskan backdrop, a massive concrete igloo 5 stories tall, rising from the tundra beside the road. It is not finished, it has never been finished, and it has been sitting there, half-built, for over 50 years. In the early 1970s, a man named Leon Smith had a vision. He would build a hotel shaped like an enormous igloo directly on the Parks Highway, a novelty roadside attraction that would pull in travelers heading to Denali National Park. Construction began, the shell went up, the concrete igloo took shape on the tundra, then the problem started. Building permits couldn't be secured for a structure with no flat walls and unconventional structural design. Environmental regulations became increasingly difficult to navigate. Financing dried up. Smith kept trying for years, but the permits never came and the money never stayed long enough to finish the interior. The igloo shell has been sitting empty since the 1970s. Decades of Alaska winters have cracked the concrete. The windows are broken, graffiti covers the interior walls, birch trees have begun growing inside the structure through cracks in the floor. It is one of the most photographed buildings in Alaska, this enormous unfinished igloo hotel beside the highway, and it is also one of the most visually striking examples of ambition meeting reality in the Alaskan wilderness. You can see it clearly from the road. You cannot go inside. It is posted as private property and structurally dangerous. But the image of a 5-story concrete igloo deteriorating against a backdrop of Alaska range peaks is something that stays with you long after you drive past. Number 7, Unga, Aleutian Islands, the Russian town at the end of the world on Unga Island in the Shumagon Islands chain, roughly 600 miles southwest of Anchorage in the North Pacific Ocean. An Eastern Orthodox church stands on an empty hillside. Its onion dome, the distinctive rounded top of Russian Orthodox architecture, is still intact. The white paint is faded and peeling. Around it, the streets of what was once a functioning community are empty and overgrown. Unga has one of the longest histories of any settlement in the Aleutians. The area was inhabited by the Aleut people for centuries before Russian fur traders arrived in the late 1700s as part of Russia's expansion across the North Pacific. The Russian-American company, the trading monopoly that essentially governed Alaska on behalf of the Russian Empire, operated here. When the United States purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867, Unga was already a multi-generational community with a history stretching back generations. The town thrived as a fishing and cod processing hub through the 19th and early 20th centuries. At its peak, several hundred people lived here. The Orthodox Church served a community that had maintained Russian religious traditions for over 100 years in one of the most remote places on the continent. Then the cod fishery collapsed. Economic decline was slow and then sudden. By the 1960s, the last residents had packed up and taken the boat to the mainland. The church was left standing, the houses were left standing, the entire community was left standing, and the North Pacific wind began the long work of taking it apart. Today, Unga is accessible only by float plane or boat. The isolation has preserved what remains better than most ghost towns manage. The Orthodox Church in particular stands as one of the most visually striking abandoned structures in Alaska, an onion dome rising from an empty Aleutian island belonging to an empire that sold this land over 150 years ago. Number 6, Portlock, Kenai Peninsula, the town that something drove away. If this video is taking you somewhere unexpected, hit that like button and subscribe, because what comes next is harder to explain. On the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, at the end of a stretch of coastline that has no road access and never did, there was a small fishing community called Portlock. It was established in the late 1800s and sustained itself for decades on the salmon runs that came through the waters off the coast. By the 1940s, something started happening. People began disappearing, not wandering off and getting lost, which in the Alaskan wilderness happens, but disappearing in ways that didn't add up. Bodies were found with injuries that the community couldn't explain. Footprints were found in the mud near the village that were larger than anything anyone recognized. Residents began talking about something in the woods above the village, something large moving at night. The explanations offered by people who study this include brown bears, which are common on the Kenai Peninsula and can be genuinely dangerous. They include the general difficulty and danger of subsistence life on the Alaska coast. They include the way that fear, once established in a small isolated community, can compound itself over years until ordinary events take on terrifying significance. The explanation that local Denaina Athabascan people offered and have continued to offer is more direct. They say the area around Portlock has always been known as a place where something lives. They call it Nantinak. Other traditions have other names for it. By the mid-1950s, every family in Portlock had left, not slowly, not one by one over years, but all of them, within a relatively short period, abandoning a community they had built over generations. No official disaster, no economic collapse, no government relocation program. They simply decided they were not safe there and they left. Today, Portlock has no road access. The structures that remain are deteriorating. The Kenai Peninsula wilderness has been reclaiming the site for 70 years, and the question of what drove an entire community off a coastline they had lived on for decades has never been officially answered. Number 5, Treadwell Mines, Douglas Island, the mine that collapsed into itself. Just across the Gastineau Channel from Juneau, on Douglas Island, the ruins of what was once the largest industrial gold mining operation in the world sit partially buried in the earth, partially underwater, and partially hidden beneath decades of forest growth. Treadwell was not a small operation. At its peak in the early 1900s, the Treadwell complex operated 960 stamps, the massive iron hammers used to crush gold-bearing ore, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The noise was so loud that residents of Juneau across the channel could hear it continuously. The town that grew around the mine had over 2,000 residents, its own power plant, a library, a gymnasium, a hospital, and, remarkably for 1900, an indoor swimming pool. The first enclosed swimming pool in Alaska was built here to entertain miners. Gold poured out of these mountains for decades. The Treadwell mines produced over $66 million in gold, an almost incomprehensible sum at the prices of the era. The operation seemed inexhaustible. Then, on the night of April 21, 1917, the earth collapsed. The mine tunnels had extended so far beneath the Gastineau Channel that they were running under the seafloor. When the cave-in began, seawater poured into the tunnels through cracks in the bedrock. The collapse spread from tunnel to tunnel. By morning, 4 of the mine's 5 shafts had flooded. The cave-in swallowed buildings, equipment, and the outdoor skating rink whole. Workers evacuated with minutes to spare. 300 men escaped. 2 did not. The mines were never reopened. The town emptied within years. Today, the ruins of Treadwell sit on the shoreline of Douglas Island, partially collapsed into the cave system beneath, partially consumed by the temperate rainforest that covers everything in southeast Alaska if left alone long enough. The Glory Hole, the massive cave-in crater from 1917, is still visible. The remains of the buildings, stone foundations, brick walls, the shell of the old power plant, are accessible on foot from Douglas. The indoor swimming pool is still there, or what's left of it, filled with debris and forest growth, its walls standing in a clearing that the trees haven't quite reclaimed yet. Number 4. Dyea, Skagway, the town that gold killed in 3 years. In 1897, the Klondike Gold Rush descended on the Alaska Panhandle with the force of a natural disaster. 30,000 people poured into the Lynn Canal in a matter of months, all of them trying to reach the goldfields of the Yukon. Two towns competed to be the jumping-off point, Skagway and Dyea. Both exploded from nothing into cities almost overnight. Dyea won the first round. The Chilkoot Trail, the famous 33-mile path over the mountains into Canada, started at Dyea. In 1898, it was a town of 8,000 people. Hotels, saloons, warehouses, outfitters, every business that could possibly serve 30,000 stampeding miners was represented on its muddy streets. For 1 year, Dyea was one of the busiest ports in the entire Pacific Northwest. Then the White Pass and Yukon Railway was completed from Skagway into Canada in 1899. The railway was faster and easier than the Chilkoot Trail. The stampede shifted. Literally overnight, the traffic through Dyea collapsed. Within months, businesses closed and buildings emptied. By 1903, Dyea had fewer than a dozen residents. On April 3, 1898, before the collapse, while the town was still at its peak, an avalanche came down Chilkoot Pass and buried a column of gold rushers making the climb. 63 people died, the bodies were brought to Dyea, and a cemetery was established. That cemetery is still there. 3 sections of graves dug in 1898. The headstones for avalanche victims standing in a clearing that the Skagway National Historical Park maintains today. Everything else that was Dyea has been reclaimed by the forest. The buildings are gone. What the miners didn't dismantle and move to Skagway. The Alaska rainforest dissolved over the following decades. Foundation outlines are still visible if you know where to look. The tidal flats where the boats once landed are empty. Only the cemetery remains intact. 63 graves from a single afternoon in April 1898, the only permanent mark that 8,000 people ever lived here. Number 3. Portage, Anchorage area, the town the earth swallowed in 4 minutes. At 5:36 p.m. on March 27, 1964. Good Friday, the second largest earthquake ever recorded in human history, struck south-central Alaska, magnitude 9.2. It lasted 4 minutes and 38 seconds. In those 4 minutes and 38 seconds, the ground beneath the town of Portage dropped 6 feet. 6 feet doesn't sound catastrophic, but Portage sat near Cook Inlet at the edge of tidal wetlands, barely above sea level. When the ground dropped 6 feet, the relationship between the town and the tidal cycle changed permanently. What had been dry land was now in the tidal zone. Salt water began flowing over streets and through buildings twice a day with every tide. Buildings that weren't destroyed in the earthquake itself were destroyed by the seawater that followed. Trees, spruce and birch that had stood for decades had their roots drowned in salt water. They died where they stood, their bark peeling away, their wood bleaching white, their dead branches reaching upward. An entire forest of standing dead trees surrounded the ruins of the town, stripped of bark and needles, preserved by the cold and the salt into something that looked like it had been carved from bone. The Alaska Department of Transportation built a new highway through the area in the 1960s, the Seward Highway, which connects Anchorage to the Kenai Peninsula. They routed it directly past the ruins of Portage. Today you can pull off the Seward Highway and walk among the skeletal white trees, the sunken foundations, the evidence of a town that the earth dropped below the tide line in less than 5 minutes. It is one of the most visually extraordinary landscapes in Alaska, not because of what was built there, but because of what was destroyed there, and what grew in its place. A ghost forest of white dead trees around the ruins of a town that the 1964 earthquake simply swallowed. Number 2. Ukivok, King Island. The village that defied gravity. In the middle of the Bering Sea, 90 miles off the northwest coast of Alaska, on an island barely 2 miles across, there is a village that should not exist, that could not exist by any ordinary logic of construction, and yet it was built, inhabited for centuries, and abandoned only 60 years ago. Ukivok was built by the Inupiat people on the face of a cliff, not beside a cliff, not at the base of a cliff, on the face of one. The slope where the village sits is approximately 45 degrees. There is no flat ground anywhere on King Island suitable for construction, so the Inupiat people who made this island their home built on stilts, driving wooden posts into the rock face and constructing their homes on platforms that jutted horizontally from the cliff. The result, visible in photographs that have been circulating since the early 20th century, is one of the most astonishing human settlements ever built. Wooden houses stacked above each other on a cliff face, connected by stairs and ladders, looking from a distance like something attached to the rock by sheer stubbornness. Below them, the Bering Sea. Above them, the summit of King Island. Around them, nothing, just open water in every direction. The Ukivok Mute people lived here for centuries, hunting walrus and polar bear and fishing the rich Bering Sea waters. Their ivory carving using walrus tusk was considered among the finest in the Arctic. They were exceptional sea hunters, capable of navigating the Bering Sea in skin boats called umiaks. In 1959, the Bureau of Indian Affairs closed the school on King Island and announced that children would need to be educated on the mainland. Without a school, families had no choice. One by one, then all at once, the Ukivok mute relocated to Nome on the Alaska mainland. The last residents left in the 1970s. The houses are still there, clinging to the cliff face on their wooden stilts, 60 years after the last person descended the stairs to a boat and didn't come back. Some have collapsed, some are still standing. The 45-degree slope means that nothing has fallen. Things that fail simply slide down the rock face until they catch on something. King Island has no airstrip. The only way to reach it is by boat, in weather that the Bering Sea makes unpredictable and often dangerous. Almost nobody goes. The village sits on its cliff above the water, slowly decomposing in the Arctic wind. The Ukivok people in Nome still identify as King Islanders. They still perform the dances and songs and ivory carving traditions of their island. They have been trying to return to restore the village, to maintain their connection to the place that shaped their identity for centuries. The island is still there. The houses are still there. Whether anyone will ever live in them again is a question that has been waiting for 60 years. Number 1. Kennicott, Wrangell, St. Elias, the richest mine on Earth, abandoned overnight. In 1900, two prospectors named Clarence Warner and Jack Smith were exploring the glaciers of the Wrangell Mountains in the remote interior of Alaska when they came across something that stopped them cold. Green cliffs, not the dark green of vegetation, but the vivid chemical green of exposed copper ore. So much of it, so concentrated, that Smith later described it as looking like a green sheep pasture in Ireland when the sun was shining. It was the richest concentration of copper ore ever discovered on Earth. What followed was one of the most audacious engineering projects in American history. A group of investors that included J.P. Morgan and the Guggenheim family financed the construction of a 196-mile railroad, the Copper River and Northwestern Railway, from the coast of Alaska into the interior mountains. This railroad crossed glaciers, bridged massive rivers, and was built through one of the most hostile environments on the continent. It took 4 years, 1907 to 1911, and cost an almost incomprehensible amount of money, but the copper made it worthwhile. Over the next 27 years, the Kennicott mines extracted $200 million worth of copper ore from the mountains above the glacier. That's over $4 billion in today's money. The town that grew up around the mines was meticulously organized. The Kennicott Copper Corporation built a 14-story mill building in red-painted wood that still stands today against the backdrop of glacier and mountain peak. They built a hospital, a school, a recreation hall, a greenhouse that grew vegetables in the Arctic winter. The company prohibited alcohol, which is why the nearby town of McCarthy, 5 miles down the road, existed to provide everything the company forbade. In November 1938, the price of copper had fallen and the richest ore deposits were exhausted. The company made the decision to close. Workers were given 2 weeks' notice. On November 10, 1938, the last train left Kennicott. The workers loaded what they could carry and left everything else: tools in the mine shafts, food in the kitchens, medical equipment in the hospital. The railroad tracks were pulled up during World War II for scrap metal. The road into Kennicott is 60 miles of gravel that crosses old railroad bridges and is littered with railroad spikes that shred tires. There is no gas station for the last 100 miles. To reach the town itself, you park your car, walk across a footbridge over the Kennicott River, and take a shuttle the remaining miles. And when you arrive, you find the 14-story red mill building still standing against the glacier. You find the hospital with its medical records still inside. You find the school, the recreation hall, the company offices. An entire town frozen in November 1938 when the last train left and didn't come back. The National Park Service has been managing Kennicott as part of Wrangell St. Elias National Park since 1998. The largest national park in the United States, larger than the entire country of Switzerland. They offer guided tours into the mill building. Rangers explain what it took to build a railroad across glaciers to extract copper from a mountain. What they can't fully explain is the feeling of standing in the Kennicott mill building with the glacier visible through the broken windows and the silence so complete you can hear the wind moving between floors, the feeling that the workers just left, that the train is 2 weeks late, that something that was full of human energy and purpose simply stopped between one day and the next and never started again. The mountain is taking it back, one board at a time, one winter at a time. The most visually spectacular ghost town in America is being slowly dismantled by the same landscape that made it possible in the first place, and the National Park Service, intentionally, is letting it happen. Because what Kennicott teaches you about the relationship between human ambition and the Alaskan wilderness is better taught by honest decay than by restoration. The mountain always wins. Kennicott proves it, beautifully, completely, one winter at a time. 9 ghost towns. A Cold War radar post facing Siberia across the Bering Strait, an unfinished Igloo hotel that nobody ever slept in, a Russian church on an island at the edge of the Pacific, a fishing village that an entire community abandoned and never fully explained why, a gold mine that collapsed into the sea in 1917 and took its swimming pool with it, a gold rush town of 8,000 people that the forest erased in 5 years, a town that the 1964 earthquake dropped below the tide line in 4 minutes, a village built on a 45-degree cliff face in the Bering Sea. and a copper mine so rich it funded a railroad across glaciers, abandoned overnight and still standing in the shadow of that glacier, being slowly reclaimed by the mountain that made it famous. Alaska is the largest state in America. It has more coastline than all the other states combined. It has glaciers that are bigger than some countries, and somewhere in all of that space, in the mountains and on the islands and at the edge of the Arctic, it has been accumulating ghost towns for 200 years. Most of them you'll never reach. Most of them are being taken back by the wilderness faster than anyone can document them. But they were there. And the people who built them, the miners, the fishermen, the indigenous communities, the dreamers who thought a hotel shaped like an igloo on a highway in the middle of nowhere was a good idea, were as real as anything Alaska has ever produced. If this video made you see Alaska differently, share it with someone who needs to see it. Drop a comment and tell us which of these places you'd actually try to visit. We'll see you in the next one.